That's what you are. Idle on parade. Half hour's extra drill. Stand up.
As with all weapons in military service, the way the soldier carried it was an important part of daily life. This was true whether he was parading on the barrack square, in the field on maneuvers, or on operations about the Empire. In this video, the first of two parts, we'll explore the way the infantryman carried his Lee Metford, from its adoption to 1896, while the second will focus on the movements used from 1896 to the close of the Boer War and the adoption of the SMLE. The various movements used when under arms with the Lee Metford were known as the manual exercise. Not only did this rifle see the transition from single-shot breech-loader to small-bore magazine rifle, but it also saw the transition from the traditional movements used for generations to a somewhat simplified set, this change occurring in 1896. That said, with the adoption of the Lee Metford in 1888, it would seem that there was some thought put towards changing the manual exercise from that of the Martini Henry. This period saw the introduction of swinging the disengaged arm while marching in quick time in certain positions. It also saw the abolition of marching in slow time. There were other significant changes to certain positions. The present arms was simplified and the slope arms modified, but generally the manual exercise had many things in common with the set of drills performed with the Martini Henry. Now, the manual exercise doesn't involve shooting or the drills so related, but it does form an integral part of understanding the Victorian soldier's daily routine, how he paraded, marched, and maneuvered when under arms. In the modern context, it's easy to dismiss the manual exercise as useless and simply a vehicle of ceremony. The reality was somewhat to the contrary. These movements were used in the field as well, and formed the very foundation of the way a soldier carried his weapon. It's also important to realize that the manual exercise was a vehicle for maneuver, and although elements of it were obviously ceremonial in nature, it was performed in a workmanlike fashion with maximum efficiency. There was no stamping of the foot or extraneous movements with the arms. The first, and perhaps most basic position, was the order. This was the equivalent of standing to attention when under arms. It was, as it is today, a position of alertness, though by its nature it was a static position. From the order, arms could be brought to a number of different positions, depending on what was required at the time. In this position, the man stood with his heels together and toes apart, forming an angle of 45 degrees. The rifle butt was held next to the small toe of the right foot. The legs were straight, and the arms were held naturally at the side, the left hand forming a loose fist, while the right held the rifle with the thumb behind the barrel. The shoulders were square, and the head and eyes straight to the front. The position of stand at ease, as its name suggests, afforded the soldier a more relaxed way to stand. There were two ways in which a man armed with a Lee Metford could stand at ease. One, when bayonets were not fixed, and the other, while they were. There also was a position known as stand easy. This was the same as the position of stand at ease, although the man was afforded the capabilities of moving his limbs about to relax and stretch. The position of shoulder arms was the most formal way a man would carry his Lee Metford. The nature of the position, and the skill and practice required to master it, made this one of ceremony and other short-term maneuver. As mentioned earlier, with the abolition of marching in slow time, the shoulder was used exclusively in quick time, with the disengaged arm checked to the side. Here we see troops about to begin their march past during a trooping of the colour ceremony in Malta. Here, a battalion of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders conduct their march past in quick time at the shoulder. Another such use of this position was during the final approach, during the posting and relieving of sentries. The relief, making its rounds at the slope, would come to the shoulder 10 paces before halting in front of the sentry position. This was also the position that the men were typically inspected in. Here, the guard of the battalion of Gordon Highlanders stand ready for inspection at the shoulder. Note the position of the NCOs on the right flank. They're holding their rifles at the advance. More on that next. The position of advance arms was a secondary position, used in certain circumstances only. It was used for minor administrative movements, such as after the dismissal of troops and they were moving off the parade square. By tradition, sergeants carried their rifles at the advance, and, especially in non-battlefield maneuver, maintained this position while their troops carried their rifles either at the shoulder or at the slope. When marching in quick time at the advance, as with the shoulder, the disengaged arm was checked to the side. The position of slope arms was the way the rifle was carried generally while on the march. Its use could perhaps be regarded as somewhat less formal than the shoulder or advance. As seen here, when marching in quick time, the arm was swung naturally from the shoulder. The hand remained in a loose fist and was not raised above the waist belt. The slope could also be used while marching in double time. Due to the ease and balance with which it afforded the men, the slope was the primary position to carry the rifle in field movements or when marching for anything other than short distances. Although the position of slope arms had been used for many, many years, the adoption of the Lee Metford and all subsequent patterns of Lee Enfield heralded a change in the movement used with previous weapons. The presence of the 8, later 10-round magazine in front of the trigger guard necessitated the rifle to be held on the shoulder flat, with the magazine pointed to the outside. The trail was also an important position. It was used on parade while marching past in quarter column, and both in quick and double time. It was used as the expedient position when standing in line at the order, and the command to step off was given, without, for some reason, the troops being brought to the slope. Perhaps famously, rifle battalions used this position extensively, although in this era, the trail was a position far from being exclusive to riflemen. When bayonets were fixed, rifles were never trailed, except in the evolution of delivering the charge, in which the front rank only trailed arms. More on that later. The present was a way of paying compliments when under arms. It was used to salute field officers, generals, colors, or of course royalty. This era saw some modifications done to the drill. It became a 2-part movement rather than the previous 3-part. As well, the feet did not move and remained at the position of attention. Port arms was used in certain circumstances. As part of posting and passing of sentries, it was the position adopted when in the act of taking post. It was also used, albeit in a somewhat modified form, to allow for inspection of the rifle. In this case, the word of command was, "For inspection, port arms." When it was required to present the bayonet to the front, the position of charged bayonets was used. During the assault, when the object was to come to grips with the enemy in close quarters, the front rank of a 2-rank close order line would adopt this position during the final rush upon the enemy. Beginning the assault in quick time with the rifle's bayonets fixed brought to the slope, the front rank brought the rifle to the trail on the word of command, "Prepare to charge." On the word of command, "Charge," the rifle was brought to the charged bayonets position and the formation broke into double time. Pipes were played, bugles were sounded, and the men cheered as they approached and assaulted the enemy position. The charge was also used by sentries when approached by unknown parties. The sentry, hearing the approach, brought himself to the position of attention and then to the shoulder. He immediately charged the bayonets and challenged the unknown party.
Halt! Who comes there? Friend. Pass, friend. All's well.
Satisfied with the identity of the person or persons, the sentry allowed them to pass through his position. He maintained the charge until the individual had passed, and then returned to the position of stand at ease. Secure arms was used to protect the action of the rifle during inclement weather. Typically used when acting as a sentry, secure arms could be used both in a static position at his post and also while he was marching his beat. there were many evolutions which used a number of different movements. The dismiss was one of these. Standing in ranks, first the men were brought to the shoulder, then they were given the command, right turn.
Des! Missed!
On the command, they first brought their rifles to the port. Then the ranks stepped apart, taking one pace right or left respectively. After a pause, they broke off, immediately bringing their rifles to the advance. When compared to the manual exercise used with the Martini Henry and other earlier weapons, that used in the early years of the magazine rifle era was similar, though not identical. The traditional movements of the shoulder, advance, and the trail were generally the same. While there had been some slight modifications made to some of the movements, namely the present and the slope, this exercise would have been very familiar to soldiers of an older generation. If the minutiae of the manual exercise isn't quite your thing, then I invite you to skip forward to about the 26-minute and 50-second mark. There, you'll find the review exercise, which should give you a good idea of how some of these movements were executed, without going through the individual steps. After that, there'll be a small conclusion with some descriptions of some of the kit worn in the video. Now that the explanations and usages have been outlined, this next part of the presentation will deal with how the movements were actually executed. The reference for this is the Rifle Exercises for the Lee Metford rifle from 1892. As with much Army training, this manual exercise was first taught to the recruit by numbers.
Manual exercise by numbers.
From the position of order arms, a number of movements could be executed. The first being shoulder arms from the order.
Shoulder! Arms! 2!
In the first part, with a flick of the right wrist, the rifle was thrown up and caught just behind the backside, parallel to the body. The right arm was bent at a 90-degree angle. In the second part, the rifle was transitioned to the left side with the barrel facing the front. Immediately subsequent, the right hand was cut away to the side of the body. Order arms from the shoulder.
Order! Arms! 2!
In the first part, the right hand came across and gripped the weapon at the lower barrel band. In the second part, the right hand brought the weapon down to the position of order arms. The left hand remained at the position of attention. Advance arms from the order.
Advance! Arms! 2!
In the first part, the weapon was thrown up with a flick of the right wrist and caught with the right hand in a peculiar fashion. Shown here, notice the particular placement of the first and second fingers. The remaining fingers were kept straight. The left hand was brought across and stabilized the weapon at waist level. In the second part, the left hand was cut away to the position of attention. Order arms from the advance.
Order! Arms! 2! 3!
In the first part, the left hand was brought across and gripped the weapon just underneath the nose cap. In the second part, the left hand lowered the weapon down to the position of order arms. The right hand re-gripped the weapon at the barrel band. In the third part, the left hand was cut away to the position of attention and the weapon lowered quietly to the ground. Slope arms from the order.
Slow! Arms! 2! 3!
In the first part, with a flick of the right wrist, the weapon was drawn up parallel to the body and re-gripped with the right hand at the small of the butt and the left hand at waist level. In the second part, the right hand re-gripped the small of the butt in an all-around grip and transitioned the weapon to the left shoulder, where the left hand re-gripped the butt plate. The left elbow was bent at a 90-degree angle. In the third part, the right hand was cut away to the position of attention. Order arms from the slope.
Order! Arms! 2! 3!
In the first part, the left hand re-gripped the butt of the rifle so that the back of the hand faced up. In the second part, the left arm was straightened, bringing the rifle to a perpendicular position, where it was caught with the right hand at the barrel band. In the third part, the right hand brought the weapon down to the right side to the position of order arms. The left hand remained at the position of attention. Trail arms from the order.
Trail arms!
On the word of command arms, with a flick of the right wrist, the rifle was brought up parallel to the ground and caught at the point of balance. Order arms from the trail.
Order arms!
On the word of command arms, the weapon was brought back to the order by shifting the grip of the right hand to the barrel band and allowing the butt to drop to the ground. Fixing bayonets at the order.
Fix bayonets. 2.
On the word of command bayonets, the right hand forced the weapon out as to angle it to the front. Simultaneously, the left hand was moved to a position at the left hip and drew the bayonet out of its scabbard. This was then placed immediately over the muzzle. Note the method of drawing the bayonet by placing the thumb behind the hilt, then drawing it out at an angle to the front. It was important to note that with this mark of Lee Metford, there was a clearing rod placed underneath the barrel, and the bayonet had to be placed on top of this in order to be fixed correctly. In the second part, the left hand was cut away to the position of attention, and the rifle brought back to the position of order arms. Unfix bayonets at the order.
Unfix bayonets. 2. 3.
On the word of command bayonets, the rifle was placed between the knees by the right hand. Simultaneous to this, the left hand came across and gripped the rifle just below the nose cap. The thumb of the left hand was placed on the bayonet catch on the hilt of the bayonet. This was then disengaged with a slight pressure. The right hand then gripped the hilt of the bayonet and lifted it off the muzzle by 1 inch. In the second part, simultaneously, the left hand gripped the scabbard, while the right hand moved the bayonet and positioned the point into the mouth. It was then seated firmly home. Once this was accomplished, the left hand remained at the position of attention, while the right hand gripped the weapon at the barrel band and the head and eyes turned to the right. On the signal from the right marker, who had positioned himself forward of the front rank for this purpose, the rifle was brought back to the order and the head and eyes turned to the front. Stand at ease without bayonets.
Stand at ease.
On the word of command stand at ease, the rifle was thrust forward to the extent of the right arm. Simultaneously, the right foot was brought back behind the heel of the left. The weight was shifted to the rear. Attention from stand at ease.
Attention!
On the word of command, the right foot was brought up in line with the left, and the rifle brought back to the position of order arms. Stand at ease with bayonets fixed.
Stand at ease.
On the word of command, the feet were moved in the usual way, but the hands were clapped in front of the body at waist level, right hand uppermost. Then they were drawn down in front of the body. The rifle was cradled in the crook of the right arm.
Attention!
On the word of command, the right foot was moved back up in line with the left. Simultaneously, the hands were moved back to the position of order arms. There were also a series of movements executed from the shoulder. Present arms from the shoulder.
Present arms. 2.
In the first part, the weapon was turned so that the magazine faced the left. Simultaneously, the right hand came across and gripped the small of the butt. In the second part, the weapon was brought down in the center of the body. The left hand re-gripped the weapon just above the magazine, and the right hand re-gripped the small of the butt with the fingers extended. Note how there was no movement of the feet during the present arms of this era. Shoulder arms from the present.
Shoulder arms. 2.
In the first part, the right hand assumed control at the small of the butt and positioned the rifle at the shoulder at the left side. In the second part, the right hand was cut away to the position of attention. Port arms from the shoulder.
Port arms. 2.
In the first part, the right hand came across and gripped the small of the butt. In the second, the right hand brought the weapon down to a 45-degree angle in front of the chest. The left hand quit the butt plate and gripped the weapon underneath, in front of the magazine, under the handguard. Shoulder arms from the port.
Shoulder arms. 2.
In the first part, the right hand assumed control of the weapon and transitioned it to the left side, in the position of shoulder arms. Simultaneously, the left hand moved and gripped the butt plate at the left side. In the second part, the right hand was cut away to the position of attention. Trail arms from the shoulder.
Trail arms. 2.
In the first part, the right hand came across and gripped the weapon at the point of balance. In the second part, the weapon was lowered parallel to the ground at the right side. Shoulder arms from the trail.
Shoulder arms. 2.
In the first part, the right hand moved the weapon to the position of shoulder arms at the left side. Simultaneously, the left hand gripped the butt plate. In the second part, the right hand was dropped down to the position of attention. Charge bayonets from the shoulder.
As for front rank, charge bayonets. 2.
In the first part, the right hand came across and gripped the weapon at the small of the butt. Simultaneously, the body was pivoted on the heels, 45 degrees to the right. In the second part, the weapon was lowered into the left hand, with the bayonet oriented straight to the front, though slightly elevated at a man's chest. Shoulder arms from the charge.
Shoulder arms. 2.
In the first part, the right hand transitioned the weapon back to the left side in the position of shoulder arms. Simultaneously, the body was pivoted back to the front on the heels. In the second part, the right hand was cut away to the position of attention. Slope arms from the shoulder.
Slope arms.
On the word of command arms, the left arm was bent at the elbow 90 degrees, bringing the weapon back to a 45-degree angle on the shoulder. Simultaneous to this, the weapon was pivoted so as to lie flat on the shoulder with the magazine pointed to the left. As the rifle reached the position of slope arms, the left hand transitioned it to a grip underneath the butt, with the thumb pointed to the outside. Shoulder arms from the slope.
Shoulder arms. 2.
In the first part, the left hand transitioned it to a grip so that the back of the hand faced up. In the second part, the left arm was straightened and lowered, bringing the rifle back to the position of shoulder arms. Secure arms from the shoulder.
Secure arms. 2. 3.
In the first part, the weapon was gripped by the right hand at the small of the butt, while simultaneously the rifle was twisted so that the magazine pointed straight to the left. In the second part, the right hand continued to twist the rifle so that the magazine pointed straight to the front, and the left hand re-gripped the weapon below the handguard. In the third part, the rifle was brought down in an arc to the front. The action was placed under the left armpit, and the right hand returned to the position of attention. Shoulder arms from the secure.
Shoulder arms. 2. 3.
In the first part, the left hand raised the weapon up so that it was perpendicular to the ground and the magazine pointed straight to the front. Simultaneously, the right hand came across and gripped the small of the butt. In the second part, the right hand twisted the rifle so that the magazine pointed straight to the left, and the left hand moved to a position on the butt plate. In the third part, the left hand rotated the weapon back to the position of shoulder arms, and the right arm was cut away to the position of attention. Movements from the advance. Slope arms from the advance.
Slow arms. 2. 3.
In the first part, The right hand raised the weapon approximately 1 inch and re-gripped the small of the butt with an open, straight-fingered grip. Simultaneously, the left hand came across and steadied the weapon at waist level. In the second part, the right hand transitioned the rifle to the left shoulder, while the left hand re-gripped the butt plate. And in the third part, the right hand was cut away to the position of attention. Advance arms from the slope.
Advance! Arms! 2, 3.
In the first part, the right hand came across and gripped the weapon with an all-around grip at the small of the butt. In the second part, the right hand transitioned the rifle to the right side. Simultaneously, the left hand quit the butt plate and moved to a position steadying the weapon at waist level. The right hand re-gripped the weapon in the distinctive advance arms position. In the third part, the left hand was cut away to the position of attention. Trail arms from the advance.
Trail! Arms! 2.
In the first part, the left hand came across and gripped the weapon at the barrel band. In the second part, the right hand quit its position at the trigger guard, re-gripped at the point of balance. The weapon was dropped down parallel to the ground, and the left hand cut away to the position of attention. Advance arms from the trail.
Advance! Arms! 2.
In the first part, the right wrist and elbow were bent, bringing the weapon to a position perpendicular to the ground. Simultaneously, the left hand came across and gripped the weapon at the barrel band, steadying it, and the right hand re-gripped the rifle in the position of advance arms. In the second part, the left hand was cut away to the position of attention. The review exercise. Now, obviously, learning the manual exercise by numbers was a vehicle of instruction. And trained men obviously practiced the manual exercise, or rather performed it, in QuickTime, with a beat of QuickTime separating the various parts of the movements. For the purposes of demonstrating efficiency and ability in the manual exercise, the troops were put through a review exercise during reviews, inspections, or other miscellaneous parades.
Shoulder! Arms! Freeze it! Arms! Shoulder! Arms! Order! Arms! Fix! Minutes! Shoulder! Arms! Charge! Minutes! Shoulder! Arms! Slow! Arms! Order! Arms! Unfix! Minutes!
As usual, a quick word about the kit worn in this video. The Seaforth Highlanders were formed in 1881, a product of the Childers Reforms and an amalgamation of the 72nd Highlanders, with their distinctive red trews of Prince Charles Edward Stuart and yellow facings, and the 78th Highlanders, the Roshire Buffs. They wore kilts of Mackenzie tartan, had buff facings, and wore hair sporn of white horsehair with 2 black tassels. The resulting uniform of the new regiment was decidedly 78th. In fact, the only differences were the cap badge and the new national facing colour, worn by all non-Royal Scottish regiments, yellow. Most of the details in this particular uniform are correct. The colours, the tartan, and the hair sporn. What are missing are the distinctive double collar badges worn by the Seaforths. The cipher F from the 72nd Highlanders and the elephant from the 78th. They were worn on the collar with the elephant on the outside, shown here on the uniform worn by the Maxim detachment of the 1st Battalion. After extensive lobbying, buff facings were returned to the Seaforths, as they had been worn in the 78th Highlanders in 1900. By the 1890s, operations across the globe were conducted generally in khaki drab or some other service dress. Maneuvers at home were conducted in almost the complete array of full dress. Though generally the upper body garment was an undress frock for field maneuvers, Highland regiments, in most photographic evidence, show them on maneuvers in their full-dress doublets. This practice would not survive the century. The coming of the Boer War and the lessons learned there would see full dress relegated to the barrack square or other ceremonial functions.